Welcome to When Love Hurts, a podcast that explores the abuse of women by men through women's stories and expert insight.
We break down what abuse really is beyond physical violence and look at its deep emotional, psychological, and societal impact.
This podcast is designed for everyone, survivors, support persons, and professionals.
Let's begin. Welcome back. Thanks for joining us again. I'm Jo Neal, and here with me is my co-host Alison Epp. And as always, we have the authors of the When Love Hurts book, Jill Corey and Karen McCandless-Davis. Today, we are going to be talking about the healing journey for women and what that might look like. But first, our land acknowledgement.
Let's pause for a moment and acknowledge we are on the unceded territory of the WSÁNEĆ people on the far west coast of Canada.
So as we've been here, we have been in such a lovely healing space, actually. We've got Jill's garden just outside, and we can see dahlias and roses. And Jill, you said last time that it's a healing place for you. Yeah. Can you say a bit more about that?
I mean, it fully engages me when I'm out there. I don't think about anything else. And I love that the dogs kind of follow me around and they're my kind of gardening partners. Yeah. And it really is just this deep concentration on the small pieces of life that are so, I don't know, to me, amazing. Like, it really is amazing that
it is.
We grow vegetables for ourselves and that we produce the beauty of it. And I don't know, for me, it just fully captures my attention. And not much else in life where I'm not thinking about a million other things. Right. So I love it.
That's lovely. Yeah. I actually just love to be barefoot in the grass. And I was doing that yesterday. Everyone else had their shoes on and I'm in my bare feet like a proper prairie girl running around, prancing around in the grass. But it's just so grounding to have your toes in the grass and touching dirt and getting yourself just connected to the ground.
You know, I'm thinking as we talk about this, the readers are going to be in the middle of winter in some places when they're hearing us talk about it.
So as we said, we're going to be talking about healing, and particularly healing in the context of abuse, because that is quite a specific context. So what does this look like?
Well, in the first edition of the book, we did not have the final chapter that we have now. We had both supported women through group, but we hadn't supported them over the longer term and really seen all the challenges and all that they navigated in the systems that we've talked about, but also how they've navigated in their own lives in terms of healing and recovering. And so when we got to the point where we knew enough and had enough women to help us understand the next chapter, the healing part of it, we, as we always do, called women together, invited women together to help us understand what that process looked like. So women taught us, as always.
Okay, we gathered them together, we fed them dinner, and we said, teach us about the healing journey. Yeah. And by the end of that evening, with that fairly large group of women, we had all the key pieces for what is the last chapter of the book and mostly what we're going to be talking about in this episode. And part of what they taught us was this idea of moving through a figure eight. So if the listeners can imagine a figure eight, and at the bottom of the figure eight, you might think of that bottom part as grieving and the top part as rebuilding. And I think this is a really helpful piece because really what we've learned is that grieving is part of the healing. Right? That women do not just sort of move forward and get a new home and go back to school or go to work or whatever it is. They also need time to grieve all the losses. There's so many losses in this context. And so what often happens is women cycle between times of rebuilding and then times of being more in touch with the grieving part. And so that figure eight can be a helpful idea of a woman may at some point feel like she's kind of more in the rebuilding, feeling a bit more energized and so on. And then other times really feel like she's in the grieving. And again, thinking about that figure eight, it can look different at different times. Sometimes the upper part, the rebuilding, might be really big. You know, she's maybe going back to school and meeting really interesting people and, you know, just some lovely things are happening for her. And the grieving part is a bit smaller. And then other times, sometimes the grieving part can be really, really big and it can be hard to find even those little moments of rebuilding. And we always want to talk about rebuilding as it's really a series of many, many, many baby steps, right? So just getting out into the garden for a little while can be definitely an act of rebuilding. So we're not just thinking about like big things.
Right.
Yeah. So just talking about the tiny little kindnesses a woman might do for herself that might be more life-giving. And that can be part of the rebuilding. So I thought we'd think a little bit about these two parts of healing, the grieving and the rebuilding. So for each of us, as we think about the women we've supported over the years, what's maybe happening for them when they're more in that grieving time?
And before I answer that, I'll just say one other thing that is important about that figure 8 is that it's open at the bottom and top.
Right.
Because we know that this is not an infinite problem that women will be processing, that there are going to be ways out for her over time.
Okay.
And we hope that this whole episode brings some hope to you. And that's part of it, is that you may always just be in the rebuilding at some point, but there might also be a time when you don't have to be thinking about any of this as much. So it's not an infinite loop.
Right.
Yes.
Not forever.
Yeah.
But when I think about on the grieving side, what women experience, let's imagine, first of all, going through all the abuse and then being out of it. But the whole thing just feels like the carpet's being pulled out from under her, and that there's no anchors, nothing, nobody's talking about what's really happened to her. And so it's very disorienting for her. Like maybe the one that we hear most often is just the loss of all the hopes and dreams that he promised, that they created together, that she, the reason she got into the relationship was for all that the relationship stood for her. And having to let go of all of that. Maybe they didn't have children. I know for lots of women who are younger women, that they were in a relationship long enough and didn't have a child, that they don't think that they're going to be able to have a child now at the age that they are. And so that loss, or as we talked about in the mothering, the loss of being able to mother and care for her children in the way she wants to. And it can really produce a sense of hopelessness, especially when women are feeling more that than the rebuilding. It's like, will I ever feel better again? Will I ever get out of this feeling? And it's not just a feeling, like, will I ever get out of this enclosure that is so hard to navigate and so full of sorrow and loss? Lots of women just say, I'm just enduring it, right? Like they're just getting and doing the next thing and the next thing, and that there is not a lot of joy yet in their lives. And so that sense of feeling kind of low or depressed and just enduring rather than enjoying.
Yeah.
And then sometimes women just feel like a failure, whatever their own beliefs are about relationships and their own commitments to marriage. It hasn't come true for them. And so as a society, we're quick to judge women and tell women that they failed the marriage, that it was their responsibility to hold the marriage together and that they have failed. And they may have regrets, like they might regret that they got into the relationship. They may regret that they brought children into it, although women would never say, like they say, we love our children, but we regret, unfortunately, the father who's involved with them. They may regret that they gave up a job or a home. They may regret that he put her in such, she maybe believed in a business and she invested her money in his business and it's all gone now. So women have lots of real regrets.
Yeah.
And for us, it's really important to let women talk about their regrets. We think lots of counselors are like, don't focus on the negative. For us, it's not about focusing on the negative. It's just being able to really fully tell their story and what those losses and regrets are.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, absolutely. I remember for me, I had never really lost anybody or experienced any other type of grief. And so it was a new experience to be grieving, and a strange one to be grieving as well, given that the relationship was not a good one. And I also think it's good to talk about the fact that as a society, we don't really know what to do with grief and sadness.
Generally.
And yet it really is part of the healing process, the part of us letting go of that reality, of those hopes. And, things like grieving the life that she wanted for the children. She can't give that to them anymore. Perhaps she didn't have a great childhood herself and was wanting this, to have a lovely family to counteract what she had.
Or maybe she's had a lovely family and she wanted to reproduce that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And she can't. It's taken away from her.
Yeah.
It's absolutely brutal.
Yeah.
One woman said that she never imagined raising children who were constantly being traumatized by their own father.
Yeah.
I mean, that is just such an awful reality.
Nobody's signing up for that, right?
Yeah. Exactly. There are just so many losses.
It's like such a betrayal from so many people. So again, on top of the loss of her own life and hopes, the betrayal of faith, her faith community, her educational community, her work community, like family, like those betrayals are such a big part of women's losses as well. Betrayal of the legal system.
Family was kind of, it was being broken, right?
By the abuse.
By the abuse.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
What she's actually done, if she's chosen to leave, been able to leave, is to get out of that.
Yes.
And yet we have this idea that a family that is, what we call intact, that's the ideal. And actually, I think any woman would say, no, much better to not be under that domination.
It makes me think again of the term we kind of came up with last time is reparative.
Yeah.
Right? Like the leaving is the reparative part, not the breaking part.
Yeah, there can be losses like the loss of home and financial security. Like we already talked about in the last episode, there's such a financial burden that can fall on so many women. And I remember one woman sharing with me how she had experienced a lot of loss in her life from death. And she described feeling so angry about the way she felt as she was grieving the losses of just the marriage and everything that came with the abuse, because she's like, I can't talk about it.
Right.
When I was grieving the loss of death, there were people knocking on the door bringing casseroles and flowers and people wanting to hear my story and how I was doing and checking in. But when she was grieving the loss of her marriage and the legal system and friends and like just everything that comes with the abuse, she couldn't talk.
Yeah.
And she felt so angry, and feeling that anger in the grief as you tally up the losses is actually quite normal.
It's been interesting over the years. A couple of times now we've had women in the group who they lost their first partner because he died, and then they lost the second relationship because he was abusive. So they experienced, both the death of a partner and the loss through abuse. And, from those few women, they said this second loss was actually much, much more difficult and harder to navigate. Yeah. And, we're not wanting to minimize how huge it is to lose a partner who truly is a partner. What we're wanting to do is elevate how significant the grief is in the loss of this relationship. And in fact, women have many more losses when they lose their partner because of abuse than marriage, right? Like they lose financial security, they typically lose their home, they almost always lose their in-laws, right? Which who have been family to them, right? And these are things that you wouldn't typically lose if if you lost your partner because of death. And as you were saying, Alison, again, we're not great at grief in our society at all, but people have some idea of how to support people through the loss in terms of a death. But women just say there's no support. No casseroles are showing up at the door. None of that. No offers to help babysit. But in fact, often judgment, right? Like, well, you made your bed, lie in it.
Yeah. I think people think it's a choice, don't they? When you're choosing to leave, and well, maybe you are, but what choice did you actually have?
Yeah. So let's think about the top part of the figure 8 now. What might be examples of rebuilding? What might women be thinking, feeling, doing when they're kind of more in the rebuilding part of the healing process?
Something that comes to mind is that they take up a hobby that they perhaps used to enjoy but just haven't been able to get to.
Yeah, that is making me think, I think it's like rediscovering themselves again. As we've shared, like so many women feel like they become, like the impact is they become a shell of who they are. Yeah. And so it's this almost the rediscovery of the things they used to love. Yeah. And some of these hobbies that maybe were there, or discovering that they do want to learn again and get back into school, or dive into a community that they've never really had the opportunity to dive into. Like in my head, I'm thinking, because we have a really cool music studio behind us, is like a music community that maybe you never had the chance to do that before. And then now you get to, oh, I'm going to go to a jam session tonight that maybe you never had the chance to do before.
Yeah. It is like the flowers opening in the garden, right? It's that opening up to who you really are, to your full beauty, who you're meant to be kind of thing. Yeah.
It's even as small and significant as being able to choose the foods that you eat.
Yes.
Cook the meals that you want. Maybe even eat when you want without the worry of what's coming. How you dress.
Yes.
Because women are so caught between, he wants me to look like this and he doesn't want me to look like this. But then if I look like this, I'm being criticized because what am I trying to do? Attract other men? And so when that's removed, women often feel like I have no idea what my own style is or what my own preferences are. So that part of rebuilding is just finding, who am I and what do I love? What brings me joy?
Yeah. It can be reconnecting with people that you became isolated from while in the relationship. And that could look like reconnecting with your family again, that maybe you really lost a lot of connection with.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think also making new relationships.
Yeah.
So you have the loss of certain relationships and community. Perhaps people didn't believe you. People are buying into his narrative. And your community, your support network might shrink, but then it grows again as you meet new people, because those people don't know him. They're not influenced by him. They just get to hear your story, meet you as you are, and that's a wonderful thing.
And you control that narrative that gets said about you.
Yeah. In fact, there's a great article on our website, the When Love Hurts website, by a counsellor and social worker who's involved in the When Love Hurts community. Her name's Shalom. And you can actually download it. It's in PDF. And Shalom spent some time really thinking about what healing looks like in this particular context, because we know the abuse doesn't stop. So is it even, she was even questioning, is it possible to heal? So she identifies things like a woman she gets to know herself and rediscover herself. She starts nurturing herself more because she's got the time to, right? Now, maybe, hopefully a little bit more anyway. She's allowed to think for herself. She can co-create safe and reciprocal relationships, which we were just talking about, where she's accepted as she is. She has a sense that she's not too much, that she is enough. She can show up authentically and more consistently now. She values her inner life and is able to connect with herself. This is a key one, I think. She has a kind inner dialogue. She's learning, if that inner dialogue has been obviously so impacted by him, it can be very critical. And also all the outside influences blaming her. So she's able to develop that kind inner dialogue. She becomes reconnected with her core values and allows herself space to cultivate her own interests. And I really love this one. She's gentle with herself. She knows how to support herself, including when to reach out to support networks.
I think sometimes women are left with this anger that they worry about because they saw what they thought was anger in their abusive partner. But for us, it feels so appropriate and aligned with what's happened to her, especially at the injustices beyond the relationship itself that she's encountered. That makes a lot of sense to me. I think, we've talked about a lot of these already, but one that stands out for me is that she can mother without interference. During the time that she has her children, there's still the interference in the big picture, but while she has the kids, she over time gets to mother and feel more confident in that without the worry of him interfering all the time.
And listeners might have noticed that we actually talked about anger both in the grieving part and in the rebuilding part. And it's almost like there's more than one type of anger. That anger in the grieving part can often just feel very heavy in the body, dense, very much connected with the sadness and loss and really kind of tallying up the losses. And anger in the rebuilding often it comes out of that confronting the injustices. And it almost feels like a fuel to do some things that need to be done, right? Like it might be her anger that fuels her to get in touch with a lawyer and find out what her rights actually are, right? He's saying this is how it'll be if we separate, but she maybe needs to. She does need to actually get accurate information, but that's hard to do, right? So anger can be a fuel to help you to do what you need to do and to defend yourself and your young in various ways. But women are very judged for anger in our society. We are kind of never allowed to be angry, but we want to normalize that. Anger is definitely part of this process, both in the grieving and in the rebuilding, and having at least one person in your life that can just hear your anger, let you have your anger, or to pour it out into a journal, whatever, and just to know it's a valid reaction. Anger lets us know that something's wrong.
Yes.
Right? It's actually an important part of our emotional process to let us know something's wrong.
I think it's also important to say that anger, if not expressed, can really build up physically in the body. And it's really important to get it out, even physically. And so I often recommend to clients to find a physical outlet for that anger. And that doesn't mean you need to like go find, I know there's smash therapy locations now, which sound really fun.
They do.
But it can also be as small as just like standing up from your chair when you feel it, or going for a really short, teeny tiny burst of running, or yelling and screaming into a pillow. Like, it doesn't need to be a huge outlet, but it is really good to physically get some of that anger out and express it in a way that doesn't build inside of you.
So just thinking again about that figure 8 and how a woman would typically cycle between the rebuilding and the grieving. And just to say a few more things about the grieving thing, we've said overall, our whole culture is not that great at grieving. But this particular grief is disenfranchised. This is a term we could apply to it. It means where society doesn't really give us permission to grieve this. And women often hear one of two things: either, well, you chose to separate, so you should be fine with it, right? Or, well, if he was so bad, then what would there be to grieve, right? But this woman, you know, if she believed that this was going to be a lifelong relationship at some point, there is absolutely huge grief. And she didn't want, most women would say some version of this, she didn't want the relationship to end. She wanted the abuse to end.
Exactly.
And after many years of sort of gathering information and evidence, she's come to a place of realizing the abuse is not going to end. And so then she may step away from the relationship. So that's that disenfranchised part that women aren't really given permission to grieve. So certainly as support people, we want to give women lots of space to express their grief, whatever it is. Women can also experience being frozen in grief for a period of time. And that might look like, you know, she separates and he immediately hauls her into court. And so she is immediately in this big court process and just trying to survive.
Right.
And grief actually takes like some space and some softer emotions and some time to yourself. And so sometimes women just survive, you know, that first couple of years or whatever. And then the grief might really come later for them. And it's really common that women feel like they're going crazy, right? Like they might come to us and say, I separated 2 years ago. So like, why am I doing all this crying now? But really, she's just finally has a chance to do some of that. And so we want to give space for women. And also just grief is super messy. It's not linear, it's messy. And another image that I think is helpful is that with grief, sometimes there's rogue waves, right? So often grief sort of comes in waves, but here on the West Coast every year, there are these, they call them rogue waves, these much, much bigger waves that come up and can actually pull people into the ocean. They're quite dangerous.
They also call them king waves, which kind of makes sense too.
That's interesting, right? Yeah, and in the context of grief, like women can feel like, okay, I'm familiar with this. This is grief. And then something maybe happens, maybe like Christmas or somebody's wedding, or, you know, something happens that just brings everything so much more into focus, and she just feels that grief so much more. So we just want to normalize all of that. The other thing that's complicated about this grief is he's still walking around causing harm.
Yeah.
Right? He's still texting her every day or emailing her every day. He's putting affidavits into court. One woman said, you know, if someone dies and you go to the cemetery and you stand there at the grave, at a certain point, you get to go inside and eat sandwiches. She's like, when do I get to go inside and eat sandwiches? Right? Yeah. Like, it's just ongoing. And the abuse is ongoing. And so the hurt is ongoing. And so the grief is ongoing. And that's a really hard part of it too.
And sometimes women really feel like they've done a lot of the work before they've left, and sometimes after. It all belongs. But when I think about in groups, what we see, because women aren't coming in at the same part of the process. So some women have left and been so taken up by all the court stuff, they haven't had a chance to really express anger or grief. And some women are still thinking about leaving. And so we have quite a mix in the group. But at some point, women really arrive at that place of grief and loss. And it's so wonderful when that happens in the context of community, where women can get support for that. And I think it takes women by surprise, right? Because they've been functioning and resisting all that's going on and trying to stay on top of everything. And then I think group kind of affords that moment that you're talking about, that space to really kind of connect with the losses more and feel legitimized or affirmed that that's part of the process.
And you've named something so important, is that lots of grieving happens while in the relationship, right? That is like, oh, this is not the father I wanted for the children. Oh, I cannot be the person I want to be. So it isn't that the grief just happens after.
Right. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And then all sort of the larger context, again, is that darn dominant discourse that's telling women how they should do it and what they should experience. And so a lot of what women get met with, especially if they've had to set it aside while they're handling all the practical demands, is that you should be over it by now. Like, what's wrong with you? And somehow we have this magical timeline of when it's okay to grieve and when they should be over it. And so, again, it's a way of making women doubt their own experience, which so much of the dominant discourse does, is it kind of takes over the narrative, much like the abuser does, to tell women if they're doing things right or wrong. And often women feel like there is definitely something wrong with me because it's been 4 years and I'm still hitting that surprised by the grief or the loss. So it just takes so long, and it takes as long as it takes. And we think the more support women get, maybe it can kind of help the process in a more kind of not expedited way, but just in a more natural way, rather than having to keep the door closed on it while they handle other stuff. So it's, again, it just is what it is. But we have a narrative that, like, there's these stepping stones, and we've been given some funny ideas about the steps that people take in grief, and so then women feel like I'm doing it wrong, right? Well, along with everything else that I'm doing wrong, I'm even grieving wrong. And we just want to say to listeners that there isn't a right or wrong way. And that's what we love about the model, is that it really, all of it belongs here. All the sorrow, all the loss, all the anger, as well as all the new joy that you're feeling and excitement. And sometimes women even feel guilty for some of those new feelings of joy or, attraction to another person or whatever, but it all belongs here.
I think that guilt kind of highlights how she never wanted it, right? Like there's yet to be a woman I've ever heard say they wanted to go through the divorce, or they wanted to leave the relationship. They go into it with such hope and excitement, and the abuse is what they didn't want. She never did want to have to end the relationship or walk away.
Actually, I just want to add something about how there's a process for a woman recognizing that the honeymoon was also part of the abuse. And that piece around when a woman starts to take that in, it's like a dawning of, oh my goodness. So it's not even that those times, I can hold on to those times, remember those times. She has to basically reframe the entire relationship. And that's a big piece, I think, for women. And that really comes into the grieving. And it takes time to go basically kind of almost shuffle through those experiences. I was talking to a woman recently who was saying that she was doing a lot of processing. She'd been taught about the cycle, and she was now looking back and sort of questioning, well, did he love me then? But what about this? And it's just like a reshuffling of the narrative for her. Yeah.
I get the image of having to pick up every piece and examine it and make sense of it in a new way, right?
It's huge.
When my father passed away and my mom was moving, we had boxes of photos. And it's not like we could just throw out all the boxes. No. We had to look at every photo.
Yes.
And then, in a way, you kind of reinterpret from where you are in life at the time. And so it's not like women can just put all of that in one box and decide that she can get rid of that. It's like having to pick up every piece and make a new interpretation around it.
Let's think a little bit about the whole kind of idea of staying and leaving. You know, I think throughout these episodes, we have talked a lot about women leaving, because that is a place that many women come to typically after trying every single thing they can think of to try to salvage the relationship. They often come to a place of leaving. But we absolutely support women who are staying in the relationship for any reason at all, including that she is hoping her partner is going to change and she's waiting and seeing what he's going to do. Maybe he is doing some counseling. We just so support women wherever they might be in that. And just to say a little bit about the staying and leaving, particularly in this moment, thinking about what might be helpful for professionals or for support people, we've developed an image that we think is helpful because there is an emotional process to separating, which is really entirely separate from whether she's living with him or not living with him. And often people have a very simplistic, well, is she living with him or not living with him? And like it's this black and white thing. But there's a whole emotional process that we want to talk about. So thinking about that particularly. And the metaphor we use is of a boat and a dock. So in the beginning, the woman has both feet in the boat, and the boat's the relationship. And she is 100% committed to this relationship. And of course, in the beginning, the man presents the boat in a very positive way, right? So it's a beautiful, very safe sailing vessel, right? And so, of course, she has both feet in the boat.
And not just safe, but beautiful. Beautiful. It's just a beautiful. It offers this whole way of thinking about life ahead. Yeah. Yeah.
And then over time, because of the abuse, the boat starts to feel more like a rusty rowboat that's taking on water. It is not feeling great, actually. And so at some point, she's going to put one foot up on the dock meaning thinking about leaving the relationship. And then in our experience, women spend a significant amount of time emotionally with one foot in the boat and one foot on the dock.
Yeah.
And if you have ever actually done that with a boat, had one foot in a boat and one foot in a dock, it does not feel okay to be in that kind of in-between place.
Yeah.
And a woman might, like 100 times in one day, go back and forth in her own head, right? It's like, oh, I got to make this work. Maybe if I could get him to go to counseling, I've got to get out of here. Where could I go?
Yeah.
Right? This back and forth. And he's doing various things that cause her to put more weight in the boat or more weight on the dock.
You know, the image that I get is like this sense of real instability.
Yes.
And he's already creating instability in the relationship. And now she's in her own emotional process feeling like there's no stability. I don't know where to land or where to put my weight.
And then as she continues to gather more information and watch him over time, and I think often when women are given helpful tools for evaluating what they're seeing too, she will eventually put both feet up on the dock, but she still looks and thinks at the boat a lot. And he might do something that will cause her to put a foot back in the boat too, right? And then and this image women have played with lots and really developed for us. And then so women have said, and then at some point I just take my deck chair and move it away from the boat and turn it away from the boat and look and realize, oh, there's a whole other world, right? And that's kind of the emotional process, assuming the woman does emotionally disconnect from the man.
Yeah.
But what she's doing physically in terms of is she living with him or not living with him are separate from that emotional process, right? A woman can have both feet firmly in the boat and he does something that really scares her and she flees and goes to her parents or a shelter or something. But she has both feet in the boat.
Yeah.
And so she is escaping the crisis, but she is not finished with the relationship, right? And so we would then be thinking about, so how do we support her as she very likely chooses, but no good choices, but goes back and lives with him because he's made a lot of promises, and, you know, he's going to go to counseling, and he's got an accountability partner or whatever it is. And so she's going to invest back in that, right? Yeah. So sometimes women have both feet in the boat and flee, but emotionally they're not separated. Other times women have done this whole process while still living with their partner, right? And I think about this woman who described she was so done with him that when he would rage at her, she would just sit in whatever room she happened to be in at the time and look around at the objects and be doing an inventory of what she was going to take when she left and what she was going to leave. And then when he was out of town for business, some friends actually helped her move out. But she was, when she actually left, she was completely done. And we also know sometimes women are trapped because various things, young children, no access to finances, they are completely done too. They have both feet on the dock, but they're still living with their partner. Yeah. So as support people, just knowing this emotional process is normal, right?
Yes.
Because I would say part of the dominant discourse is, if you wake up in the morning and realize you're being abused, you should be out by 4 p.m.
Yeah,
right? Like,
that really is something that's
abusing. Then you should leave. Except, oh no, you shouldn't, because he only hit you the one time, right? All the confusing messages.
Yeah.
But people don't recognize that it takes a long time. It would take a long time to leave any relationship that you thought was a lifelong relationship. But because of the cycle, because of that confusing cycle, it's normal to spend a long time with one foot in the boat and one foot in the dock. And so we're often just supporting women in that in-between place. And we just really want to normalize that takes like months, couple years, whatever it is, like however long it takes.
However long.
But not days or weeks.
And I know it can feel really frustrating sometimes for professionals. And I've heard that from certain professionals. And I think that's actually quite normal to feel frustrated of like, why is she not leaving? And I think I keep coming back to listening to episode 7, where we talk about how complicated it is to leave and how post-separation abuse is totally excruciating and cruel and awful and hard. And so it can feel so frustrating watching from the outside and not knowing what they're feeling on the inside and what's going on and what she's kind of trying to process. And again, I think what was so beautifully highlighted in that analogy is she truly knows and is the expert of what is the safest and best option for me in this moment. And if it means I'm going to be both feet on the dock, but still be with him, that she knows is her best option for now.
A friend of mine who's a lawyer once said she'd supported a woman for a long time, and they finally got to court for the final divorce proceedings. And the mother said to my friend, the lawyer, well, she's finally out of it. And my friend said to me, well, she stayed for so long because he threatened to kill the mother, the woman who was experiencing the abuse, and all the children. So again, it's like what we don't see and what we don't know. Without knowing all of that, it's easy to judge. But knowing that we don't know, Karen, you always say it's what we don't know that we need to be curious about, not to draw conclusions or judgments in the absence of knowing.
So, Jill, as we're coming to the end of season 1, you've been doing this work the longest. What really keeps you going?
Well, for sure, the women. I've loved being back doing women's support groups. It's so important to me. And we talk about the courage that it takes to do this. And at the same time, how I hate that women have to have courage. That what I wish they had was more support, and that they didn't have to have all that courage and strength. But I do love to see their own resistance to all of this. They're not accepting of it. It's not okay with them. They do fight back in the ways that they can without risking more harm to themselves. I'm here because I've worked with providers, with advocates for over 40 years, and they are a special group of women in every community. And it's one of the things that I love and that we love about going to communities is these amazing women doing this kind of invisible work of the community without being really well compensated and valued.
Yeah.
And I want them to know that we see them. And I think we've said some hard truths about how professionals support and don't support women. But I think we really want to say, we see you. We know the work that you do. We value the work that you do. Yeah. It keeps us going as well. Yeah. We can't do this alone, as you can't do it alone.
Yeah.
So we hope that you have a community around you to help you challenge the dominant discourse, because you're fighting that fight every day as well. Mm-hmm. Right? And some of these women are women who've experienced abuse and then become an advocate. Mm-hmm. Are they getting the right support? So Karen and I love to be able to do the work that we do, to both value them and to give them more of what they need to keep doing the work. Mm-hmm. And basically, finally, Jo, and you know me, like, the fight is not over. We are not where we need to be. Right. So as long as there's injustice, as long as there is inequality, I want to add my voice to the transformation. And who knows for how long, but I also feel so encouraged that there's women who are taking up I think it's a battle. They're taking up the battle and taking up this important work. So I want to thank you for joining this process.
Yeah.
Jo and Alison are incredible examples for us. I got the privilege of meeting Jo and Alison right for both of them when they were right in kind of the center of the crisis. And they were shells of the people that they are now. And our listeners have heard how incredible both of you are, how wise, articulate, how much you have to bring, how vibrant you are, all those things. And that is certainly part of what keeps me going, is that I get to see this transformation in women. It's such a privilege to get to do that. If a woman is listening right now and feeling hopeless and overwhelmed, we really do want to say that healing is possible and in fact will happen. It takes time to find the right kind of support and to identify the friends who will be with you through the long haul. Yeah. Those friends are precious. Our biggest hope for you is that you could find a counselor or an advocate that really understands abuse. Often a way to find a counselor is to call your local women's shelter or resource center and ask them about programs in your community. And hey, both Alison and Jo are taking new clients at this time. So you could reach out to them, and their emails are in the show notes.
All we know is that this is messy. This is challenging, certainly more so for the women than for us, but it's messy for anybody working in this field. Having an abusive ex-partner makes everything 100 times messier, 100 times harder. And we just hope you find a community of support people around you to help you through this.
We cannot thank you enough for the incredible support in this first season of When Love Hurts. We know a lot of this content we have shared is heavy and not easy to listen to. And some of you may have to take this content in really, really slowly. And some of you may absorb it all and listen to all 8 episodes in 2-3 days. Both are normal, and that's okay. We are all in this together, and one of the most incredible things I have found for myself is the joy it is to be surrounded by other strong, resilient, and compassionate people. And some of those people are right beside me right now. So thank you. We will be back for more in season 2. More stories, more information, and more connection. So if you want more information, we've shared a few things that will be in the show notes today, but you can always go to our website, whenlovehurts.ca. And as always, connect through the hashtag WLHcommunity and like, share, and subscribe this content. We appreciate all of the support, and we want more listeners to get their ears listening to this. This season was supported by the generosity of MCC Canada. And if you want more, we are still looking for that sponsor for next season. If interested, please contact us through whenlovehurts.ca. Thank you.